All right, NYB community, we're back. Episode 225 of the Minding Your Business podcast, entrepreneurship, real estate, trending news. There's no business like minding your own. We're recording this on Monday, November the 23rd. It's Turkey Week, Thanksgiving. I hope that, you'll be safe. And I know there's the temptation to get together with family and pretend like this is 2019. No, I'm sorry. We want to make sure that we're being safe and respectful of everybody and protecting health as much as possible. But of course, we're not here to tell anybody what to do. So do as you feel, but just keep that in mind along the way as we enjoy this particular week in celebration of Thanksgiving. And we all have much to be thankful for, even in spite of a challenging year that it's been, for all of us to adjust. And then many have had the challenges that have come with 2020, unfortunately. But this is a great time to sit down with your family and really be extra thankful for all the opportunities that we have on a day-to-day basis. As bad as things have been, as we all realize, and some people have experienced, things could always be much worse. And so keep that in mind as we go along. Subscribe to the podcast, 5-star, wherever you get your pods. That helps us continue to grow the MYB community. And of course, you can always connect with me on social media as well as champronbrooks.com. Speaking of Rons, it's not too often that I get to talk to another Ron, and he's got a tremendous, if you thought my name was cool, Ron Rock, that's the coolest name in America. Is to be Ron Rock. I mean, think of all that you could be. You could be a successful entrepreneur. You could be just an everyday dad. You could be a rock star. I mean, couldn't you imagine your favorite rock star being named Ron Rock? Wouldn't that be just awesome? Or your favorite rapper, your favorite musician, your school teacher, anybody could be named Ron Rock. It's just the coolest name. And so I've got Ron Rock here joining me all the way from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I guess they finished counting the votes at some point. So Ron could join us. He's the CEO at Microshare there. And so there's a number of subjects we want to get into, but I don't want to steal his thunder. And so, Ron, thank you so much, my man, for joining us today on episode 225.
Well, thank you, Ron. Thank you for that great introduction. I have no doubt I will now let everybody down because I am nowhere near as exciting as a rock star or a football player or any of the other great things that a name like Ron Rock should be. So thank you for that. And also thank you for having me the week of Thanksgiving. I travel a lot globally. I always have. And Thanksgiving is a uniquely American thing. And it's in the times that we've been through and with the election and everything else, to have an American holiday. It doesn't matter what your religion, what your race, what your orientation or preferences. It's a holiday to just be with people that we love and care about and say thank you. And it's a really cool thing. It's my favorite holiday of the year. So this is a great way to start Thanksgiving week. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yep. You're tremendous and great insight there, Ron. Great perspective. And you're right. I left that one out. Your favorite starting quarterback could be named Ron Rock. That'd be tremendous too.
That's right. Right.
In the NFL or college football. Ron, let's jump into it. For those that aren't familiar with you, tell us about yourself, your journey, to how you got to what you're doing today.
Well, sure. Thanks. And talking to you before the podcast, it was fun to hear that you're in financial services. Yep. I've spent most of my life as an entrepreneur. I started selling computers before anybody knew what they were, the original Macs, the original IBM PCs. And I started my first company when I was 26 years old.
Wow.
And there was no great business plan. There was no fanfare. I prior to that, I was a cook at Denny's. I worked my way through school as a chef. I used to restore old cars. I would rebuild 10-speed bikes. So I always had this idea that how hard can it be? You just tackle it. So I was in business. I was a salesman selling computers, and one of the biggest law firms in the country came to me with a problem. And I thought, I think I can fix that. And out of that was my very first company. Since then, I've started or been involved in 6 startups. Some of them were crazy successful. That doesn't matter. There was one that was a huge, colossal failure. And the failures you never forget about. So lots of lessons learned. In the process,
Sure.
though, I also spent about 5 years in the credit card industry, financial services, payments on a global basis, and also was part of a publicly traded software company out of Boston called Pegasystems. So I've had
Wow.
a blending of entrepreneurial, do-it-yourself. I've had a real job a couple times, and I like to say to people, I start my own companies now because I think I'm virtually unemployable. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to give me a job. So if I want
Yeah.
to put food on the table, I start my own thing.
You start your
So
own
my
company.
last company I started in 2003. I grew it globally,
Yeah.
and I sold it to Accenture in 2010. And
Okay.
then the company I'm with right now, I started it in 2012. So as a matter of fact, in the next couple of weeks, it'll be 8 years that we've been doing this company, and I've had the
Wow.
same partners for a couple of them, and
Okay.
all of them have always been in the same industry. So
Yeah.
it's exciting. It's in software. We'll talk more about that. But the headline
Sure.
for the listeners: cook at Denny's. Check number one. Check number two: just go figuring out how to make stuff happen, and that's how I end up starting and growing these companies.
Yeah, absolutely. When you started, Ron, coming as a cook at Denny's, and I agree with you. I think that's a great way, that people should start. Go work at Denny's, be a cook, and then launch your own companies. Oh, for sure. Take the Ron Rock approach. But when you started, did you have was Denny's kind of serving as seed money for you to start? Did you have access to funding and things like that? Because I think a lot of people listening to this, that's one of their biggest challenges is, where do they find the money to, one, sustain themselves as they're building their idea and kind of get things launched off the ground.
Yeah, that's a great question. No, there was no seed money from Denny's. Denny's was beer money back then, and helping pay tuition. But the first company I started, I had a day job, and
Okay.
so I decided to solve this problem on my own free time, weekends and evenings. And once I had it
Sure.
done, I was able to start growing.
Yeah.
And most of the companies that I have started, we ended up just taking little bits of money, usually
Yeah.
family and friends, not a lot. Most entrepreneurs, and certainly most investors that look at early stage companies, they really expect the founders to be putting a lot of skin in the game.
Sure.
And so there's a hesitancy to fund companies so that you can pay yourself to figure something out. And I don't
Sure.
know that that's right or wrong. It just simply is. And so in the early days, I was working 9 to 5, putting my own food on the table, and then taking my personal time and getting it started. It wasn't until this company, Microshare, where I actually went out and raised a reasonable amount of money. And I needed to do that because most of my companies, I would say, have been reactive. I saw an opportunity in the market, and I built a product or a service to fill that gap. Microshare was something that 8 years ago, my partners and I looked at, and we had a vision of where we think the market was going. And we weren't going to be able to generate meaningful revenue for a couple of years. And so we needed to raise enough capital to build out the software, to build out the product.
Sure.
And they're very different models, depending on where you are on that continuum as an entrepreneur. But I would say for most entrepreneurs, you can get to MVP, minimally viable products, out in the market, usually you and your buddies on weekends and evenings in the garage. The proverbial story is quite true.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're exactly right. And even in my banking days, I worked with several, business owners that's exactly what they did. I can remember going and signing loans in people's garages where, and in their bonus rooms and stuff, like their bonus room became their office and the garage was the production floor and, that sort of thing. I mean, it never fails. And so MYB, as Ron's mentioning, that's a great way to start. And, you mentioned something else that a lot of people don't do is, you had your buddies, as partners, right? And a lot of times what I hear, Ron, is that, there's no one either that has the wherewithal, like, people will say, my friends don't have the wherewithal. They're not good with money. I can't trust them. Their interests tend to wane. They have the squirrel kind of mentality that, whatever's the flavor of the month. And so, how did you work through that dynamic, with your partners, and, how you all stayed on the same page and communicate and that sort of thing? Because I hear that all the time. When, the thing that's tough is for people to be able to trust, and then have that communication. And then so people go and try to do it on their own, because they want to be king or queen of the hill for their own idea or their own function. And I've always seen that as a mistake a lot of times that people make.
Yeah, there's a lot of room for humility and sharing and being a successful entrepreneur. The people that try to do it all themselves, I'm certainly it's doable, but increasingly it's harder and harder. The world's
Right.
very complex. It's moving so fast. Thanks to cloud, the cost of creating any new business has plummeted to $8, $10, $12 a month. There's no longer
Sure.
a big capital expense. And the software and the markets are moving so quickly, whether it be in Europe with Brexit and the EU, whether it be in the US going from globalism to isolationism, all the varying things. You can't be everything all the time. You have to pick your discipline. In professional sports, no one player plays every position. You need the experts to create a team. And a team really is what wins at the end of the day. So, the other thing about partners over time, and by the way, just like companies, I've had a few partnerships that failed, and they're painful and they're ugly. They're like divorces. And I've also had some partnerships that withstand the test of time. You have to realize that if you're successful, you'll be spending more time with these partners than you do your significant others or your family in the course of a week. You'll also go through tremendously high highs and really low lows. And in those low moments, you learn who's got your back. People can say all the right words, but can they really walk the walk when it's all hitting the fan? And it's in those moments that if you're lucky enough to find a partner or two that is absolutely there with you, win or die, then they're the partnerships that end up working over time. And typically, early childhood friends, college mates, that's, they work on the surface, but you're dead on, Ron. You get to, people are funny about money. People, when push come to shove, there's all kinds of EQ and IQ things going on that get in the way. So, it's hard work, but just like being an entrepreneur, it's hard work to find a partner, but it's worthwhile so that you have the ability to share the load, and hopefully you have a 1 + 1 = 3 equation to get going.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Ron. And so, as you're launching these companies, right? Obviously you've talked about software, you've talked about, from a technology standpoint, has there been a technology that's been your favorite so far? Like one that really you're really proud of, and not so much whether, how well it may have done dollars and cents wise, right? But, maybe it just had a huge impact, or maybe there were some hurdles that you had to cross that you were able to, talk to us maybe if you have one that's a favorite technology from one of your companies that, really stands out for you.
Well, I don't know that I have an answer for that the way that you might be asking, because we've, a lot of my products have been services, bundled services with software, or a physical piece of hardware. It was what I did in the mid 80s, a physical piece of hardware that allowed you to have multiple computers sharing a printer. I mean, things that today we take for granted. But there's certainly been a discipline that has been a defining component of my career, and it's in what they call business process management, or BPM. The ability to automate virtually any process that you work through in a company, whether it be hiring or customer service or payments or collections. And when you start to automate a business process typically is the antithesis of the way companies organize themselves. We've got accounting, we've got manufacturing, we've got sales, we've got customer service. There are all these pipes, and business process management cuts horizontally across them. So having a mindset to begin to take any organization and turn it on its side and begin thinking about inputs and outputs as opposed to disciplines, being able to automate that. Well, the minute you start to automate that, you're in a data conundrum. You're going to be ingesting, trying to bring in data from all different kinds of systems, old systems, new systems, different formats, regulated data, unregulated data. And so the complexity to take BPM and automate it, I was lucky enough as a customer in the early 90s to be introduced to a company called Pegasystems out of Boston. I learned their software. I worked at Pegasystems for a while. That's where I met my partners. It's Ron, it's a way of thinking that is extremely rare in the marketplace. Sure. And so even when we started a couple companies, there was that competency of BPM is what we've been building on. And now with Microshare in IoT, with billions of sensors, all with different data formats, different data owners, regulated and not, data sovereignty, different levels of encryption and security, it's still that relying on that same competency that my team and I have developed over the years.
Yep, absolutely, no doubt. And you talked some about IoT, and I want to get to that here in a second, Ron. But you've been, as you've described, you're kind of this evolution. So I was born in 1981, right? When I was born, right, I was born the year that MTV hit. You started having people having cable TV boxes and that sort of thing. I remember, people in my generation, it's been a very unique experience, right? Because I'm old enough to remember like very, kind of linear, kind of, analog type of, systems. I was a big, Nintendo, then you had the Super Nintendo. Say, like I've seen that, that linear ascension of technology. I remember being in middle school hearing about the information superhighway, right? Where we used to have Channel 1 with Lisa Ling, who's now, she's been around now 1,000 years. But I don't know how old she was on this channel, but I remember sitting in class with the TV mounted on the wall, sticking out from the wall, 3 feet. Talking about the information superhighway and how all these computers are going to be connected and we're going to be able to get all this information and, and then going through that, getting my first email address in college and, and then here we are, my iPhone costs what 2 or 3 laptops cost now, and so that's all end user type stuff. Right. But, sure. You've kind of been there for it all, so to speak, in your professional career. And so I'd love to hear.
You're saying I'm old. Yes, thank you.
Pretty much, yeah. And I'm heading that way.
Okay.
That's basically what I was saying was, depending on the age of someone listening to this, either we're both old or, one of us is further along than the other. But so you've been there to kind of see it all. So you'll talk about that evolution, for the consumer market. As you've been a part of that in developing, whether it's hardwares or softwares. Can you talk about that impact of that? I mean, obviously, it's obvious that we see it right where we are today and what we've got. But I guess, did you anticipate this quick of evolution in our technology? Say, if you were to go back to 1990, 1991.
Well, I can go back even a little bit further, Ron. I mean, my first job selling computers was 1984, and they had just announced the IBM PC, and it was a dual floppy drive, monochrome monitor, and you could do basic word processing and a brand new idea called electronic spreadsheets. It used to be Lotus 123, then it became Excel, and I was selling to companies that had mainframe computers, or they had dedicated word processors. And I was selling a new way to think about running their business, a new way to think. It used to be that everybody had secretaries. And all of a sudden, PC was the beginning of the end of the secretarial pool. You suddenly had to type yourself. And I can remember being in my 20s and talking to guys in their 50s, and they were insulted to think that they would have to learn how to type. That was somehow a menial task. I was fortunate enough to have a nun with a yardstick slap me constantly until I learned how to type as a teenager, always thinking at the time it was a waste of time class. Now in hindsight, I thank that nun every night in my prayers
Right.
for, for teaching me
good.
that, right?
Yeah.
But there's always been a part of technology that intrigues me in the sense that, I've got severe ADD. I love shiny new objects. I love going after the new thing,
Sure.
and learning that people genuinely don't like change.
Right.
And I think this is true for a lot of entrepreneurs. There's the critical mass at wherever they are at a moment in time. And there's new technologies, and some new technologies are 3, 5, and 7 years out.
Yes.
And I look at them and that excites me. But can I make money today selling something
Mhm.
that's 7 years out?
Right.
There's no. And a lot of entrepreneurs make that mistake. They come up
Yeah,
with such a
that's true.
great idea, but they'll never. Now you get back to your first question about funding. Can I get enough money to sustain myself for 7 years until the world catches up with me?
Yeah.
Probably not. Can I get enough
Right.
money to sustain myself for 6 months while I reel in my vision and I just get to the baby steps of the next level of innovation? And if I'm making money today, I live to fight another day. If I'm not making money today, the best ideas in the world never see the light of day because they simply ran out of money.
Sure.
And I don't know why, Ron, but somehow I got very comfortable bridging the gap between where we are today and where we're going in the future. And I
Yeah.
got specifically good about that in boardrooms, at C-suites, being able to go to very senior executives who really are, it's the equivalent of when we used to talk about having your kids program your VCR.
Right.
There's very few people in the C-suite that really know what the cloud is, really know what the fully integrated iCloud and seamlessly weaving together your whether it be your Dropbox or your Box accounts or your how to do all payments with security, dual factor authentication. They don't really get that. And
Yeah.
so my ability to bridge the technology and explain to senior people with budgets, with influence, why this is important to their business, putting the
Sure.
technology in context as to
Sure.
why it matters for you. That's kind of been my sweet spot. And it started with personal computers. It then went to local area networks, connecting computers together. Then it went to cloud. Then it went to Y2K, beginning to offshore, to mostly to India, bringing global programming worlds together. Then that wove into the dot-com bust. And then, and I was my biggest failure that I talked about was a .com, wildly funded. We grew from one employee, me, to over 80, and then fired everybody within 9 months. Didn't get the money that we were expecting to get because it was in March of 2000, just as the beginning of the end of the .com. And so I think what I'm getting better at, and it's, you never get there. But the journey that I'm getting better and better at is trying to figure out what is the space between where everybody is, where we're going to be, and how can we commercialize a piece of that now to be successful in November of 2020 and continue our journey. So over the next 3 to 5 years, it plays out in a way that we think it's going to play. Did that make sense?
Yeah. No, it makes total sense. No, it does, because, understanding I think, what I take from that, Ron, is your ability to have foresight and vision, but then the critical piece, which is the ability to communicate to business leaders, right? To put it in their language, to the impact, right? So it's one thing, like you say, to know what that shiny object is. It's another thing, and I think sometimes this is rare, coming out of the tech industry, and it's gotten better over the years, right? It's this ability to communicate the business need, right? And then how it contributes to the things that business leaders, C-suite, cares about, right? Is whether it's the impact on people, the impact on community, their competitive advantage, position in the marketplace, whatever those things are, right? Your ability and your team's ability to communicate that and to take what the technology is, like to take that and then apply that and communicate that in plain English so that, those men and women can understand that. I think that's a skill set that's sometimes can be considered very rare. And I think I don't know if it's a skill set that is developed as much as you just naturally either have it or you don't. Right. I mean, the ability you have to have the experience, and you being a business owner, you started, kind of the beginnings of the personal computer, kind of compare with this, so my first intro to computers as an African-American kid, that was born in Chicago before making, his way down to Memphis. My dad, who was a civil engineer, brought home a Tandy 1000 with the double floppy, whatever.
Sure,
and
sure.
I used to whoop ass on Space Invaders and Oregon Trail and all that type of stuff, right? And so because and that was different from my dad's generation, right? Because he started using computers as an adult. I'm on the computer at 5 or 6, so I'm developing the hand-eye motor skills. I'm understanding, and looking at tinkering with the computer on how it worked. Because I wanted to know, I kind of picked up some of that gene from my dad. I wanted to know how it worked. When I press the on button, what happens, right? And so, I'd get in trouble for, unscrewing the top off of it and looking at the gears. And, I think I pulled out the hard drive on one of them and got in trouble for that. But I was just curious as to what was going on inside of it. Right. Yep. And so, being able to, like you say, have that understanding and then communicate that in a verbal and written sense to people who are making decisions, I think is such a critical piece. And I think, many companies that are successful nowadays have found some kind of medium with that, right? As, technology has evolved so rapidly. I mean, I got married in 2007. That was the same year the first iPhone came out, right?
Right.
I've been married, next year will be 14 years. And now now we're on iPhone, whatever, 20 or whatever it is now. And the thing's pretty much going to see through walls.
Before you had it?
I remember. So my first iPhone, my first phone was I was in high school, and for the prom, my mom got me a Nokia phone. It was around prom time, the end of senior year, and that little Nokia phone that had Snake or whatever, that was a little game on it.
Yeah.
So that was my first cell phone, and even those times of going into college, Ron, cell phone plans had minute limitations. I mean, I'm talking about things that people now, someone born in 2000s, like, whoa, what are you talking about?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you and I know that they had, minute limitations. A text message was 20 cents out and 10 cents coming back in or something like that. I mean, cell phones weren't designed to be your permanent only phone. You had the landline for that. And so, yeah, I remember that. I remember we bragged, Ron, about having color screens on our phone. I remember when that first happened. It's like, oh, look, mine's in color.
That's funny.
The first time it had a camera, the first time you could listen to music on it, all that stuff came so rapid, it blows your mind. I mean, CDs were big, and it's almost like the next day, we're just downloading everything from Apple Music or, Pandora or something like that.
You touch on something interesting too, Ron, how sometimes you can get it so wrong. I thought, who would ever want to text somebody if I can talk to you? So I missed the whole texting thing. I'm like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. And for the longest time, I would say, I don't want a camera on my phone. I want my phone to be a phone and my camera to be a camera.
Right.
Now, my whole world is texting and integrating with photographs. And that's where you look at a visionary like Steve Jobs and you say, he didn't wait for the world to catch up. He had a vision and he had the wherewithal to bring it to make us love his vision. Elon Musk is the same way. I heard for my whole life growing up, electric cars are never going to be successful, never going to make it. And up until about 10 years ago, Europe had decided it was all going to be turbo diesel. They told us electric had no chance. One man all by himself said, no, I'm going to pay. And here we are.
Here we are. Right. Exactly.
It's always, again, I talk about humility and humbleness a lot. It's amazing how things are right in front of you when you look at it 5 years later and you're like, wow, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. And like you say, that rapid piece of how technology is done. But like you said, and you touched on something just now, Ron, which has always been kind of my philosophy of technology personally, is that technology helps the human do what it should be doing best. Human beings are best at building relationships. They're best at the qualitative pieces of so if you take in business, right? Human beings are best in the qualitative role of understanding the need, the heart behind it, and then forging and fostering relationships. Data calculation is probably not the strongest suit of the human being, right? Human beings do it very well, but technology, the computer, is much better at that, right? It's much more efficient. It's much more accurate, and so technology should be used to handle those more of the transactional pieces of business, right? For example, when I do real estate investing, I do 95% of it from right here because I'm either on the phone, like you mentioned, I'm text messaging, I'm on various apps, I'm sending emails, I'm attaching things as PDF, and then with the emails, those things are then automated, right? Someone reaches out to my form, they get an automated message, they answer questions. Depending on how they answer those, that gets automated then back to me or someone on my team, and then they're getting a phone call from the relationship piece where the data is already there. I know, about their property, about how much they want, what's their motivation for selling, how quick do they want to sell, blah, 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 blah. Right. And so that's completely different than how I would have ran the business 20 years ago, 15 years ago.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
Completely different. I mean, people sign my contracts, before we got on, I got a signed contract through, like say a DocuSign type of, platform. And here we are, we got a contract going and we're off and running, took me very
Yep.
little time, that sort of thing. So like you said earlier, the cost of technology has driven down that incremental cost of doing business. But the other side of that is it's now expanded the need to be able to process information quickly and then forge relationships, right, from that information. And so that leads me to kind of a question here, because with what you're doing today, Ron, and none of us could predict, even with technology, none of us could predict this pandemic, right? What are you seeing in regards to how business owners and business leaders are making decisions in the midst of this pandemic? I kind of liken it to kind of being in a storm where you don't have much visibility, right? And so you're having to navigate the road, but you can't see 5 miles down the street like you can on an open highway, right? And so you're having to make decisions and things like that as you're going down the road. But what are you seeing specifically from your vantage point into how business leaders are making decisions around utilizing technology, the BPMs and IoT, that sort of thing, in the midst of the pandemic?
Yeah, no, good question. Lots of different ways to take that, but I'll build on something you wrapped up on right before that question, which is that the technology today has made it so guys like you and me can do a job that virtually was impossible for my parents to do.
Yes.
Right? This idea that you can have that device in your hand and be at home, be in your car, be on vacation. Physical proximity is no longer a requirement
Yes.
for jobs. And this was well on its way before March of 2000. Then COVID-19 hit.
Yeah.
Think about our ability to be doing this podcast right now, both of us
Yeah.
sitting at home. Think
Yeah.
about the fact that most white collar workers can work from home for the foreseeable future. Facebook just said they're not even worried about anybody coming back for the next year and a half, and they're going to permanently put in place a work from home. So you
Yeah.
can work out of the office 3 days a week, or you can work from home. Very interesting also that they hit right out of the gate. They're going to adjust your salary.
Yeah.
So I have a neighbor here in Philadelphia who works at Facebook. He would fly to San Francisco every week
Yeah.
and fly back. And now if he's going to stay in Philadelphia, they're going to adjust his salary for living in Philadelphia, because you can have the same quality of life in Philadelphia for a fraction of what you have in San Francisco.
Right.
So they're automatically beginning to understand the economic impact. And because of the technology, which we just talked about, it is now feasible for people to do this.
Yeah.
So the world falls into two big buckets. There are people that can work from home for the rest of time, of which we are part of. And then there are people that can't.
Right.
Nuclear power plants, trash collection, food distribution, pharmaceutical manufacturing, military, hospitals. In that whole world, I have to begin figuring out how to create a new ecosystem that's going to be safe for them to come back and work.
Yeah.
And Ron, I speak a lot about the analogy of COVID-19 and 9/11. Right after 9/11, the whole world went into a tailspin.
Right.
And traveling was a disaster. Not only did every country have its own security procedures, every state did.
Yes.
And it took us a couple years to begin figuring out, what is the protocol? But here we are 20 years later, and there's a global infrastructure around air travel. Whether you're in Hong Kong, Taiwan, London, or New York, you're taking your laptop out, you're taking your shoes off, you're going through a metal detector, no liquids allowed. Like we figured it out as a planet, and now we just take that for granted. We never went back to travel September 10th. We never went back to that. So in COVID, now people say, well, we're going to go back to normal. No, we're not. We're going to go to a new world, and there's a permanent piece of COVID that will be with us forever. We now know as a planet that a virus can stop the world on its axis. Nobody really believed that could happen. No, we see movies in Hollywood, but nobody thought it could actually happen. Now we know it can. So what is that permanent infrastructure? Right. And what do executives how do they make those decisions? And going back to my 9/11 analogy, we're still at ground zero with the dust settling. We're really only been living COVID for less than 12 months.
Right.
And so we still don't know what we don't know. So people are making the best decisions they can with as much information as they've got. I share often with my team and my partners, if anybody tells you they know what's happening, they're lying.
Right.
Because none of us know. Exactly. Whether it be the progress of the virus, the mutations of the virus, will the vaccines work or not, global, social distancing or not. We're all making the best decisions we can every day because we're one day smarter, but there's a lot more we don't know than we know. And that creates a really challenging business environment. And where I see people right now is, again, going to those two big buckets. The white collar workers, they're investing in Zoom. They're investing in HR. They're investing in all the infrastructure to let people continue to work from home indefinitely. On the other side of the coin, I see people investing in safety and well-being, battling the privacy concerns, right? We're getting the clash of who owns that data, Big Brother watching me. So trying to figure all that out and investing in new infrastructure. It's not going to be good enough now for your buddy to say, hey, Ron, come on in. I don't think so. I want to see on my phone, just like we look at Waze today and find out what's the real-time traffic and where are the cops and how do I navigate from A to B. I want real-time data to help me get in my car and get to where I want to be. I'm going to expect that same level of real-time data. Am I walking in an environment that's safe, that's clean?
Yes.
Are there too many people in there? Are they socially distancing? Because today it's COVID-19, tomorrow it's COVID-20. We're going to want data.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
So that's I don't know if that answered your question, Ron.
No, it did. It actually took it beyond what I was asking, in a tremendous way, Ron, because that last point that you made, I think really summed it up is that, today it's COVID-19, and using that analogy of tomorrow could be COVID-20. right? And one of the things, man versus virus has been around since the beginning of time, right?
Sure.
It never, you think about it, we talk about this stuff about a vaccine. Where was the vaccine for the common cold, or what we were, because that's a form of COVID, right? Um, has there ever been a vaccine for that? No, there's nothing that's ever eliminated that. We live with it. When it gets cold, we start thinking, here comes the flu, another form of COVID. We just live with it, and there's a what we call the flu shot, right? And that worked for some people. Some people get other experience, you know what I mean? But life went on, right? But you really sum that up in terms of, from the business sense, is that while you can't prepare for COVID-19, 2021, however they progress, the things that you can control, and that sort of thing, is how you develop the relationships, how you respond, the culture that you create, and how you can leverage technology, like you say, to improve, life, to make things easier for yourself, easier for your employees, easier for your customers, easier for your community, to interact with you and to do business. You touched on something, and I want to see, how your company works through this. The idea of how you create safe environments, in physical places, right? Because one of the things I think we all know, at some point, people are coming back to the office. They're coming back into spaces, and we're going to have social contact again at some point. Now, that's, again, like you said, this new environment we're going into. For the last 8 or 9 months, I think many people have been on pins and needles hoping to get back to normal. Ron, I want to get back to normal, right? Which is really just the sign of, I want to get back to the old. I want to get back to how we were, doing things before, good, bad, or ugly, and the biggest thing is, I want to be able to plan, right? So
Sure.
I want to be able to, do all these things, and I want to be able to plan for tomorrow. And I can't do that today, Ron. Right. And so, I'm upset, I'm uptight about it. Right. And so you make a tremendous point that, we're always going to have, there are always going to be obstacles. There are always going to be some things unforeseen, that can come. That's a tremendous point. What is your company doing, Ron, in terms of that space of, protecting, using technology to protect people as
Sure.
we do get physical contact, to whatever form that takes? And I've seen, entrepreneurs work in the space. We mentioned airports, obviously a huge breeding ground and concern for things like viruses, and how you sanitize those.
Yep.
And I think, whoever comes up with the way to sanitize the airports around the world, like you talked about 9/11 picking up the travel guidelines, I think, Ron, whoever picks up the next billionaire, or one of the next billionaires, is going to be the man or woman that figures out a way to properly sanitize those public spaces, things like airports, things like event venues for concerts and sports events and that sort of thing. Whoever comes up with that as a way to do that's as minimally invasive, I guess, as possible, and as efficient and quick as possible, is probably going to be the next, even beyond Bezos and Elon Musk and those folks.
Yeah. Well, so for Microshare, we've been around for a while, as I said, and when March of 2000 hit, we were doing, one of our legacy products is indoor asset zoning. We let hospitals track wheelchairs, infusion machines, hospital beds, where they are inside. It turns out that indoor asset tracking is pretty hard to do, and if you want to do it inexpensively. And we've been doing that for a while. And so when COVID hit, we realized that we could use that same technology to provide contact tracing. So you and I, if we spend more than 10 minutes, 6 feet apart or closer, that's what the World Health Organization would consider a contact event.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to be able to track contact events in the workplace, whether it be factories, college campuses, power plants, coal mines, whatever it may be. And so contact tracing was our first, and we bundled that with 5 of our other products into what we call a clean equals safe campaign.
Right.
So the first thing we do is we provide real-time occupancy.
Okay.
So occupancy has always been important in real estate, but now with COVID, it's got a new meaning. Imagine getting ready to go to lunch and you looked at any TV monitor where you work, and there's the cafeteria in red, yellow, or green. If it's
Sure.
green, it says, Ron, come on down. If it's yellow, hey, if you can wait, wait.
Right.
Red, don't come down now. There's too many people in the cafeteria right now.
Yeah.
So real-time occupancy. The next one is real-time environmental monitoring. We now know that certain temperature and humidity and lack of flow of air is more conducive for the virus to spread or not.
Yeah.
How do we know that we're breathing fresh, clean, filtered air in buildings?
Very true.
Now let me look at my smartphone real time or monitors around my office work that's giving me a red, yellow, or green of the quality of air. Another thing we make available is, you walk into a space and you see something that disturbs you. The easy example I use is that, I'm sure being a banker, you've been in meetings before in the conference room and nobody can get the big TV to work. Who do you call? Well, usually you call the assistant of who's hosting and they go running around and they try to find somebody that's going to come in and get the right cable. What if there was a button right on the wall that you pushed that said, hey, come in and I need help with the AV equipment. Hey, the conference room is dirty. Could somebody come in and service it? Hey, there's a problem with the waste bins. It's overflowing. Could somebody please come in and clean?
Right.
How do you communicate with your infrastructure? I spent a lot of time in London, as you know, and they have a see it, say it, sorted. If you're traveling on the tube and you see something that you don't like, see it, say it, sorted. That's great. Who do I say it to? Right? So what we do now is we've put these touch-free barcode questionnaires across hospitals, factories, power plants, and we customize them. So you scan your phone and hit the button. Hey, this bathroom is filthy. Hey, can you replace the soap or the toilet paper? Hey, there's a water leak. Hey, somebody's sick here. Send help. And it's immediately giving messages to the proper people on the back end. So part of clean equals safe, if you empower me with data and you empower me with buttons that I can push, if something makes me nervous, I'm beginning to create an environment where people feel safe. I had a CEO of a Fortune company a couple months ago say to me, Ron, I love this. I'm sure it works.
Yeah.
Where's he going with this? He said, but even if it doesn't, putting these sensors and putting these push buttons visibly around my facility shows that we care, that we're doing something about it.
Exactly.
So that's what Microshare is doing right now. And with that clean equals safe, some of the biggest companies in the world have selected us to implement the products. We were just on the front page of the New York Times last Monday. Been in the New York Times 3 times in the last 6 months, made the front page of the Financial Times, the BBC, and it's just been exploding around this whole idea of providing real-time data, empowering people in your space, making them feel safe. And we happen to be doing it also in some clever autonomous ways that allow us to maintain anonymity. So we're not invading on we're not using your smartphone. We're not, commingling your personal data with your work data, all those things that are beginning to cause concerns as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, those are, very innovative ways of kind of viewing, kind of low impact, I guess, processes to get to, again, the new world that we evolve into is this concern, like you say, of safety. Right. And it goes to almost a larger point, Ron, in terms of what 2020 has brought about is it's challenged the first word in our name as a country, and that's united, right? As the United States of America, this year's exposed the united piece of that, whether it's the presidential election, again, whether it's social and racial injustice, whether it's the all those things have
fires.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The California fire, everything has challenged our notion of how we unite and what we unite around, or unfortunately, sometimes with politics, what we fail to unite around, are what we politicize, right? And so that those things, fortunately, unfortunately, are going to continue. But I love the way that you position that as kind of that, the environment that we're going to. This is going to be the new expectation. So it's not necessarily a new normal. There's a new expectation that's coming from this, and who's going to be in position to address and not somewhat appease, but develop that expectation, right? And that's what's happened. That's what happened with Amazon, is the expectation, right? Before Amazon, our expectation was to go to Barnes and Noble and buy a book. All right.
Yeah.
Then the expectation is, how can I get that book and save a little bit of time and, make it a little more efficient for me. Right. So here comes Amazon as the online bookstore. Now you buy everything that you could buy from Amazon. Right. And it makes it very convenient. But what Amazon misses is the experience. You don't get an experience with them, right? They created convenience, they do all this, but you can't have the experience with them, right? They put the product out there, you feel like it's at a reasonable price, you buy it, they ship it in 2 days if you got Prime, right? But you don't get a chance to learn the history behind it. You get a chance to experience it, to feel it, touch it, right? And so, same thing as you talk about, like I say, in the airports. Okay. I'm a business traveler. I'm mostly, traveling domestically. I'm always, prior to, the beginning of March, Ron, I was in and out of airports, all the time. And, at that time, I'm not, like I say, you wash your hands, you do this stuff, but you're not thinking about the people around you and, the rails and, going into the Delta suite and, having something to drink, something to eat, and then waiting on the plane, getting on, putting your bag up, all the stuff that's just routine for us, jumping in the rental car. Now, all these things, this expectation now is on everybody's mind, God, was this sanitized? Are there too many, like you say, too many people in here? How do I know? I have to go there to find out. I have to walk and look and see. And if there's something that eases my expectation, right, as a consumer, as a person, that you view that then as a success, right? Not just for yourself, but then your family. Because one of the concerns with this, why I haven't traveled, is, again, I've got other family here that lives here. I've got 3 daughters, got a wife, got 2 dogs. I want to protect them as well. And so, again, I love how you tie the social good into what you're explaining to as, things that are of high technology and how it can satisfy those expectations. As you progress, what's next? I guess what's next for you in the company? Right. And I know it's hard to project this as we go into 2021, Ron, but what do you see as kind of next on the horizon? Like what, for your kind of progression in your career with the company and then the company itself, what do you see as next, on the horizon as we get into this new expectation?
Sure. So I think, like any new technology or new wave of behavior, there's going to be more than one global leader. But in almost everything that becomes popular, there's less than 5. It's Apple and Android. It's Mac and PC. The world's not big enough for 5, 8, 10 standards, right? It's Visa, MasterCard, American Express. Like, we end up shaking out that way. Our goal for Microshare is I want to be one of the top 5 people shaping this new infrastructure in the next 5 to 7 years. And we're just at the beginning of putting the physical infrastructure in place to get the data. The next big question, what do we do with the data? Who owns it? Why do I care who owns it? Because the data is worth a lot of money. Data monetization, global data mart, data anonymity, data sovereignty. So there's so many components of that data that excites me. And people say, oh, data, we've done a wonderful job in the press, scaring the heck out of people about using their data. We didn't stop flying airplanes because a few bad people figured out how to use them as weapons. We haven't stopped, you come from banking. We haven't stopped using credit cards because some people have figured out how to steal credit cards and use them for nefarious reasons. We understand the risk, we quantify it, we bake it into the business model, we absorb that cost in a way that the benefits to society outweigh the risk, and we manage. The same thing's going to happen with data. If I could come to you tomorrow, Ron, and say, hey, I want you to give me $30 a month. And in addition, I want you to give me all your personal data, the data coming off of your Nike shoes, your iWatch, your headphones, tracking everything. And you're like, whoa, that's my personal data. And I say, no, Ron, listen, one day I'm going to send you a push notification. It's to say, Ron, I'm tracking 100,000 men just like you, your height, your weight, your activity level, your diet, everything. And every time one of them has a heart attack, their data looks just like yours does today.
Yes.
I talk about using data to not only extend life, but extend the quality of life. We used to spend all this money on airbags, and we got front airbags, side airbags, knee airbags. And then about 10 years ago, a bunch of kids in Stanford had a radical idea. How about if the car doesn't get into an accident in the first place?
Yeah.
Now our cars, the airbags are still there, but the cars don't hit anything anymore. They stop. What if I could do the same thing with data for your life?
Yes.
That's the promise of what excites me. We're going to extend life. We're going to extend the quality of life. We're going to help save the planet because we're going to get smarter about emissions and sustainability. We're going to, so many of the social unrests come from, problems with the healthcare system, problems with education. I mean, we could go on and on about a political conversation, but at the end of the day, bringing real data to bear, real time, is going to help us start to solve those problems. This is well beyond my pay grade, well beyond what I'm going to be doing for the next, 5-7 years, that I want to keep pushing hard on what I do. But I think we're setting the foundation so that your kids and my grandkids get to a stage where it's a pretty cool planet because we figured out a lot of this stuff. So that's where I see it going.
Yeah, absolutely. And that figuring out of stuff, with again, we talked about that rapid progression of technology. My hope is that continues, and that continued, progression of technology helps us socially, right? And like you said, to the greater good, and technology helps unite us to where we figure out some of the social ills that we have, particularly in this country and maybe beyond. That again helps the environment, like you say, be just a little bit better, better in how human beings treat the environment, to your point, how human beings treat each other, how human beings treat other living things. I mean, all that, I think, technology could definitely be a catalyst, Ron, to say the least, in doing that. This has been, God, Ron, just a tremendous dialogue. We've learned a ton today from you, and with the work that you do. For those that want to connect with you, how can they do so? How can they connect with the company if they've got interest? If someone's operating their business today and says, you know what, these are some guys and girls I really need to connect with.
Well, thanks, Ron. Sure, it's microshare.io. Microsoft, only share, same spelling, microshare.io. Again, Ron Rock. I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn. Always welcome questions, people reaching out, happy to help, especially entrepreneurs. I chock full of advice. So if anybody wants to ask me questions, happy to help.
Yep, absolutely. That's tremendous. And they can reach out obviously through the website to connect with you, there, Ron. And, MYB, I encourage you to do that. I think you've learned a ton today. You've got a great feel for Ron and his team and the culture that he leads over at Microshare. So I encourage you to go to microshare.io and connect with Ron there, and let him know that you heard him here on the Minding Your Business podcast, and definitely share with him questions. One of the great things that I always envision for this podcast is that it'd be able to connect people, right, and connect people to resources to learn and be just a little bit better, right? And I think if you connect with Ron, I think you'll find tremendous feedback and dialogue that can help you in your business and help it be just a little better. So, Ron, we definitely appreciate that. That link is in the show notes, MYB. So click there when you get done with the site, go and peruse and learn a little bit more about Ron and his organization there at Microshare. and then reach out and connect. I encourage you to do that. And so, Ron, listen, I've kept you way over time, my friend, but I really appreciate this. I appreciate your valor and your transparency, kind of in your walk. I'm sure we could have talked another 2 hours about all the challenges and all the obstacles and things like that you've endured and your team, but definitely appreciate the vision that I think you're someone that's been on the kind of the front end of technology, certainly for people like me in what I've seen in my generation and helping kind of push forward these visions that have us where we are today. And so definitely thank you, for that. And definitely best wishes to you and your family on this Thanksgiving week and beyond. And I really appreciate you.
Thanks very much, Ron. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your wonderful family as well. 3 kids, 2 dogs. Sounds like the perfect American family for perfect American holiday. So
yeah, it's the perfect American family where I've got all girls and I can't watch football on Thanksgiving.
That's a different conversation.
Yeah,
but
I got to watch HGTV.
Thank you very much. Great. Love your questions. So thank you and best of luck.
Yep, absolutely. Take care, Ron. We really appreciate it. That's Ron Rock, folks. He's the CEO of Microshare. Make sure you go to microshare.io. Do that when you get done listening, okay? Connect with me, champronbrooks.com. I'd love to hear from you there. Don't forget, I have the Real Estate Investing for 2021 workshop that is just about full, so you need to hurry up. I think I looked before the show. I had 94 spots taken out of the 100. And so that means about 6 slots are left, maybe less, depending on when you're listening to this. So if you are interested, join in with me. I want to help you if you're interested in getting into real estate investing. And listen, I'm going to debunk the myth about no cash and no credit. That's not true. Okay, so tell your YouTube guy I told you that's not true. You will have to have maybe a little bit of credit. You may have to have a little bit of money to market, but you can get involved in real estate investing. And I'm going to show you exactly what I do. In order to do that, what I've been doing since 2007. I'll share with you the banking side behind that, which I'm well versed in, and then I'll share with you how you can find properties and get into investment and be a resource. It's not just about making money. It's about, can you solve a problem for someone else and be a resource to someone else? And so that's the angle that I take, and that's the angle we'll take on the workshop. So go to champronbrooks.com to register for that. Listen, we're going to get out of here. Thanks again to my guest, Ron Rock. Thank you to all of you for your support of the podcast, and definitely enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday. And remember, like I always end these shows, remember this, and especially this Thanksgiving week, as you spend time with family, whether it's through Zoom or maybe you do face-to-face, the 3 areas that unite us all, no matter where we're from, no matter what generation, no matter what side of the tracks we come from. We all want to be a little bit better for ourselves, a little bit better for our families, and a little bit better for our communities. And if you keep that in mind with everybody you interact with, we'll all collectively make this place just a little bit better. Champion, the Minding Your Business podcast.